crazy day.
We can also do it as an add-on, just like images for your.
Think about it during my opening remarks.
Yeah.
All right. When I get to that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Good evening, and welcome to the March 24th, 2025 meeting of the City of Summit Planning Board. My name is Stephen Spur, and I have the privilege of serving as chairman of Summit's Planning Board. If you'll please rise, we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll offer you some brief amended opening remarks here. In accordance with New Jersey Statute 10:4-10, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to newspapers of record and posted here in City Hall. For the benefit of the interested public, this meeting is being live streamed to the city's YouTube page and also broadcast on Summit's government channel, which is Comcast Channel 34 and Verizon Channel 30. Any hearings on applications for development in this meeting, for which there are none, would be quasi-judicial proceedings. Any questions or comments must be limited to issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Please note that fire exits are to my right, your left, and at the back of the room where you entered. The city has a listening system to assist the hearing impaired. If anyone needs hearing assistance, please obtain the necessary equipment here at the dais and return it immediately after our meeting. Ms. Cotiga, will you please call the roll of the members?
Ms. Balsan-Alvarez.
Here.
Ms. Bowen. Mayor Fagan.
Here.
Councilmember Hamlet.
Here.
Mr. Del Masso.
Here.
Mr. Felmet.
Here.
Mr. Formicelli. Mr. Stern.
Here.
Mr. LaJoy.
Here.
Mr. Sala. And Chairman Spur.
Here. Excellent. And then maybe just jumping ahead really quick, we'll acknowledge that Peter LaJoy is joining us as a Class 4 member, alternate 1. Ryan Felmet's stepping up in the world, Class 4, reassignment. Congratulations, Ryan. And Susan similarly stepping up to a member, but remaining in the Class 4.
And if I may,
Please.
Chairman, and all three have been administered the oath of office, have, I believe, signed
Yes.
their oaths, and they are thus authorized to participate this evening, and hence took part in the roll call and will take part in the balance of the meeting.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Warner. For anyone who was interested, Mr. Warner is the planning board's attorney. Mr. Warner will advise board members on matters of law and serves as a key interface with each applicant's attorney. Mr. Warner will not vote on applications or other matters formally considered by this board. Nicole Cotiga, who led us in the roll call, is a city employee and is the planning board secretary. Ms. Cotiga assists applicants in preparing their applications, planning our agendas, and keeping our meeting minutes. For anyone who is preparing applications, Mr. Del Masso and Mr. Nicola also pitch in every now and then. Ms. Cotiga does not vote on the applications or other matters formally considered by this board. Among the board professionals, one is in attendance tonight, of course, in addition to our attorney. The board professionals are contracted annually by the board and provide input to the board. Tonight, Mr. Joe Burgess is joining us from Burgess Associates. Mr. Burgess is seated at the table to the right of the board, the public's left, and does not vote on applications or other matters formally considered by this board. Our board consists of 11 members. All members can participate in any hearings that would have been heard tonight, but a maximum of 9 can vote. All applications require a simple majority to be approved. I will spare you the next page that I usually offer because we don't have hearings this evening, but that's really kind of how we run our meetings and what you need to know to understand who the folks are here on the dais and how we'll be operating. Before we jump into each of the agenda items, just acknowledge that there are no resolutions being voted on this evening. We will not be holding a closed session for discussion as we did in the last meeting for those that are paying close attention. And we're just going to make a slight rearrangement to the discussion topics, so bear with us. We'll hear update on DRO review and revision first. Our review of housing element and fair share plan process, and then we'll open the listening session for preliminary state plan. So hear from the public last in case we do need the extra time, and hopefully some of the folks will show. We appreciate everyone who made time out of their busy schedule to join us tonight. So let's move first to just quickly approve January and February minutes. As the first question, though, is were there any amendments following review by board members to either January or February? No? Okay, with that, we ask for a motion to approve first the January 27th, 2025 minutes.
So moved.
Augusto with the second? I saw you go.
Second.
Oh, Paul beat you, sorry. All right. Need a roll call, or
I'm
is
sorry, who was the second?
Paul Stern?
This is for January 27th.
January 27th, yep.
It does reflect a board member's turn not being here.
Yeah.
February, okay, you can do February then, so Augusto's
No,
taking the
that's fine.
second then
Okay.
for January. Thank you.
Apologize for having to point that out, but we
No,
got to
you're
make
good,
sure it's
you're
right.
Yep.
As was announced, that's my job.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. All right, we'll roll call for that?
If you want.
Do we? No, we can do a
Oh,
voice.
you can do
we
a
voice vote?
Voice.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain. Thank you, Mr. LaJoy. Excellent. All right, we'll move then to our February 24th meeting minutes. Mr. Stern, would you like to motion that? Excellent. So a second?
Second.
Okay. And then all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain. Thank you, Mr. LaJoy. We will note that accordingly. All right. Thank you. We can move on to our discussion topics now. Just as a bit of a preface, you'll see this as a recurring agenda item. The planning board has committed, certainly over the last couple of years, and we're making it a bit of a habit this year as well, to begin a process of continually reviewing and recommending revisions to the development regulation ordinances, really what the nuts and bolts, wherever it hits the road when it comes to your zoning ordinances here in the community. So our esteemed vice chair, Ms. Wilson Alvarez, is leading that group along with Paul Formicelli and Peter LaJoy. So we'll invite her to offer any kind of informal update if you'd like on how those discussions are going.
All right.
Thank you.
So as you all know, we just did a bunch of edits, and that was what the attorney and I were talking about. There was one thing that I asked Joe about, and maybe Mr. Werner can talk about it as well. Whether we could add to our 2024, which are really first quarter 2025 changes, whether we could add a line item giving us some flexibility to update some images in there, because we didn't really talk about it, but there's some not so great images in the DRO that don't really illustrate the text as well as they could, and whether we're allowed to legally just say, let us change these, or whether we need to actually, follow up with another package showing the exact changes of what images may get changed.
And as planning board attorney, because certainly city attorney may have a view as well, but it may be problematic to do it prospectively, to simply say, we're going to add images, we don't know what they are yet, so therefore we can't tell you or show you. I guess show you more to the point, depicting images, what they depict. But we'll do them when we do them. So I would want to double check to make sure we were comfortable doing that, and that frankly the city attorney was comfortable doing that on behalf of the governing body.
Right.
With respect to those amendments, because of course we recommend, we master plan consistency review as the planning board, but the governing body would be introducing and adopting
Right.
those ordinances. It may be that with or without that language, they may be deemed to be not significant or substantial amendments, but maybe
If it's
do
a
not
one-for-one
require-
kind of like, this is a better picture of that idea.
If
I don't
you-
know if it's just better to say, we're going to be sending images later for you to bless.
Yeah, I would say it could not hurt to have such language, and on a case-by-case basis, particularly the city attorney may wish to opine as to whether he or he, I believe, is or is not, Mr. Jacoby, I assume, is or is not comfortable with a certain image or set of images coming in, whether that's so significant it requires
Right.
an amendment as opposed to simply saying, oh, we told you more, we're coming before. That's the way I would view it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
if
It was some of
anyone's-
the feedback we got.
And I think if
It's a
anyone's
solid
lost in
maybe.
the weeds here in the audience or over YouTube, revision to the DRO tends to originate here, recommendation from the planning board goes to the governing body, assuming that's accepted or modified, would return back to the planning board. That's a lengthy and cumbersome process. So what our vice chair is referring to is what we may consider to be relatively de minimis changes, maybe even improvements to the DRO, and we would prefer that not to take, call it 3 months or more, to transmit back and forth depending upon the speed and prioritization of it. So we're trying to get clever here and see what we can do.
Would this be an appropriate time to talk about any further changes to the DRO that we
I
might
think-
be
Yeah.
thinking, or?
Jeff was going to speak to some other items.
About
but-
potential new topics.
Sure.
Or more edits. But with regard to changes to the one we just did, just never would I suggest that we change any text
Oh,
willy-nilly.
sure,
No,
sure.
that would, every word they need to see and every word I want the governing body to approve. I was just talking about images for clarity. Because we have some images that are not great to clarify the text. So that was the question.
Great.
Anyway, so for 2025 DRO changes potential, have a starting running list, but want more. We had already talked about in the old subcommittee, exploring ADUs, accessory dwelling units, exploring both, we talked to a lot of the commissions and the public and architects. The Historic Preservation Commission and the Environmental Commission have an interest in fewer demolitions in our town, and it's also consistent with our goal number 1 of our master plan. It is good for the environment, uses fewer BTUs, doesn't fill our landfills, maintains the character of Summit, which is goal number 1. So that's something to explore. Looking to enhance in the DRO, enhancing the stormwater management requirements for new construction and additions, because we're getting evidence and feedback from the community that it doesn't seem to be sufficient what we're doing. So looking into that, and then that's mainly what I have. I'm just looking forward to talking to our subcommittee and going forward. What ideas do you have?
So I have a few. One is the topic of lighting, which seems to follow me everywhere I go lately. I think it would be interesting to look at the lighting ordinance for a couple of reasons. One, I think we might be violating our own DRO. If you look at P, it says string lights or lengths of LED lighting around any architectural element of a building shall be prohibited, excluding holiday lights. So in the Summit downtown right now, we're talking about taking the string lights off of the trees and putting them back up on that cable wire, which I think is a good thing. But if everybody wants to keep the string lights, then we should probably adjust the DRO accordingly. I'm sort of agnostic to, I think they look nice, but I also wonder, I think they look really nice, but a lot of them are hanging, a lot of the bulbs are out, and maybe somebody in the community has better ideas. So I think we should look at item P. And then I've noticed recently that, and I've struggled with the consistency review, and everybody knows I've struggled with it, but for a few reasons. So to give you an example, we just redid the paddle courts at Wilson. And one of the things I was actually speaking to another council member yesterday, and she pointed out that we need pathway lighting, because now people are going to be playing paddle in the dark, and we forgot to include pathway lighting. So, and that was a City of Summit project, and that's okay, but that's again why I keep advocating for the planning board to look at a lot of these projects. The council member, I shouldn't say that was my idea, the council member Camelson mentioned yesterday with the changes to where the tennis courts are, and there's parking lot lighting. In our DRO, it says that lighting to sports facilities should be activated by a motion sensor or turned off after the sporting event. I think I recommend that we just change that to at 9 p.m. they're turned off, or 10 p.m. or whatever we decide. But a lot of times I don't think motion makes sense because if somebody's just walking by the paddle courts. So I think we should look very closely, considering everybody's lining up at the council door talking about lights at that. And I think we could probably find a pretty collaborative community, and we could come to some compromise on that if we can strengthen this.
Yep, those are good.
And the same thing goes with the parking lot at the field house right now. Lighting's a little rough there.
All good.
Anything else come to folks' minds on DRO? Otherwise, you know where to find Jennifer. She's never far away.
You can email me. My email starts working.
That's
Yeah.
Cool. And maybe I would acknowledge, Dan, you reminded me, thank you for being here this evening. We had transmitted through the 2024 recommendation, reversion, again, as a recommendation, reversion of the EV standards to the state model. But the next step was to examine what modification beyond what the state model may call for would be appropriate for someone. So
Yep.
I know that was probably on your your
Yeah,
list as well.
that's it. We got part of it in the one that's going to council right away. And then he also had some other good suggestions that would be in touch.
What was the outcome of that? Because I know we said in our, was you talking about electric
Revert to
vehicles?
the states,
So if we revert to the state, what happens to ours? And then,
it goes away.
so the no advertising goes away on the EV chargers?
I don't think we had tackled that. I know
We
you
didn't.
brought it up, but I don't remember
So it's
if we
been, the
tackled that.
recommendation has been sent to the governing body, so if you have
Oh,
any
okay.
time in the nights.
Hasn't been there.
You can take
Let
it from
me
here.
follow up.
But this is the type of collaboration, right,
Okay.
that's intended.
I recently got a hybrid vehicle, so I'm like, it's all I do now is research how much I can save and where I can charge. So I'm like super excited about this.
Yeah, no, that's right.
I remember the discussion now. I don't remember if it got in the last one, but it'll get in the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyhow, so, not a lot of low-hanging fruit left. We kind of took that all off in 2024, and now we're digging into some meatier subjects.
I did want to just put on one other comment. It's sort of related. I'm not sure where we're at in the meeting, but if we could look at the resolution for the turf field, the most recent turf field, even though it was a consistency review, I believe that we put in one of the conditions that they had to replace the trees between the Summit Housing Authority and the turf field. I'm certainly passionate about replacing those trees, and there was recently a grant where the Board of Ed and a municipality can apply for, I forget the name of the grant, but I've sent it around. So I think that we should, if it was in the resolution, which I haven't looked, I think we should hold their feet to the fire, and it's the right thing to do for the Summit Housing Authority.
Okay. Not on the agenda, but worth noting. Thank you. So we'll follow up on that for sure. Okay, anything else DRO-wise?
I'm good.
Otherwise, okay. They'll keep churning along there in the subcommittee. The intent with the DRO review and revision is before the end of the year to transmit another round of recommendations to the governing body. If, however, we deem some of this to be of greater urgency, we can, of course, expedite that. That doesn't mean everything has to come through, but some of these items are probably a little more clear-cut. Others will merit some discussion and debate internally here and potentially also with the public. Okay? So concludes our DRO review and revision updates. As I mentioned briefly before, we're just going to switch these last two. As part of our review of our housing element and fair share plan process, this evening we'll ask Mr. Burgess to provide a general update as to how the process is conducting, what we can expect moving forward. We've taken a moment really out of every meeting for, I don't know, the last probably 6 meetings to do that. But it's useful as we're really live within the housing element and fair share plan development process right now. When Mr. Burgess concludes his remarks, I will outline the public engagement plan, how we plan to engage the public principally here at the planning board regarding the housing element and fair share plan. I would just note ahead of what is now the third item in the agenda tonight, the preliminary state plan listening session. Housing is a part of the state preliminary state plan. It is not the totality of it. There's, in fact, 10 goals, 10 focus areas. And while we would welcome input on housing as part of that conversation, you will note in the public engagement plan that I'll describe for you here, there will be ample, multiple opportunities, robust opportunities with context for the public in attendance this evening, watching on YouTube tonight or later to really engage on Summit's affordable housing obligation, how we're scoping that, how we plan to tackle it. So in case anyone's here for it, we welcome your affordable housing input, but know that it's a bit of a broader scope of inquiry that we're opening invitation for comment this evening. So with that, Mr. Burgess, what's been happening in the world of housing element and fair share plans?
Nothing at all, nothing at all. As you're aware, the state has started the process with 6 retired judges who are reviewing all the applications for reductions in affordable housing obligations for their individual municipalities. Interestingly enough, a total of 440 municipalities are participating in the process, which is well beyond what anybody's expectations were. I mean, typically the estimates were about 300 to 350 towns, so it's a good number. 159 municipalities have received formal objections to their adjustments. Fair Share Housing Center has 68 of those objections. The New Jersey Builders Association has filed a total of 159, so there's some overlap between the two entities. And in addition to that, there's some private developers and other interested parties that have also filed objections. I would say the best thing we have ever done here is not to object to our number, recognizing we are going to be seeking a vacant land adjustment anyway. Those municipalities that are involved in this process it's an interesting process. The towns have asked for a reduction in number. In some instances, Fair Share Housing Center has sought to increase their number. My favorite example is one municipality that sought a 25-unit reduction in their affordable housing obligation. And because of what's called a reallocation method, and I'll explain that in a moment, they received an additional obligation of over 200 units, which caught a number of people by surprise. Reallocation represents those affordable units that are going to be lost through the process by virtue of municipalities saying they are fully developed and do not have sufficient area to accommodate their full obligation. Fair Share Housing Center had taken the position that in this instance, about 13,000 units we're talking about, that those 13,000 units have to be reallocated to municipalities who can accommodate the development. Unfortunately, what they have done is penalize those municipalities that, pursuant to what they were entitled to do by law, is by asking for a reduction. They have reallocated those 13,000 units back to those municipalities that had the audacity of asking for a reduction.
And that, just for clarification, that, if I may, Joe, that's, Mr. Chairman, that's the 159 Joe was referring to, which is roughly a third of the 440 that have had the audacity to take up the invitation from the legislature and the courts and DCA itself, who conceded that their numbers were not entirely correct, and if you chose to challenge, then you get the benefit of reallocation being added to any reduction by anyone.
Yeah, the DCA regulation specifically indicated that their numbers were preliminary and non-binding, and they welcomed and encouraged municipalities to provide additional input so they could refine their numbers.
I believe
and that was,
the term is gotcha.
That's exactly the term. So that process has been ongoing. I know Steve has been involved in it a lot. I've represented 5 of the 6 judges reviewing plans for over a dozen municipalities. And the process is long and arduous for the towns, and not always resulting in a satisfactory outcome, I could say. And that process will end next Monday, right? The 31st, yes.
By statutorily, March 31 ends on March 31 this year.
Right.
So,
After,
actually, the date is in the statute, March 31.
Right, so after that, what will happen is everybody will then know their number, and we start preparing our housing plans. Now, Nancy had put together a timeline for us to act. I'm sure everybody on the
Nancy
board
Holm is the Affordable Housing Council, for anyone who's curious. We're
Yes.
all on a first-name basis.
Ms. Holmes.
Yeah.
And then the next critical dates that we are should be aware of is there's 2 scheduled meetings in early and mid-April to go over with the subcommittee on some structure of how the housing plan should be developed. The key date is June 30th. By June 30th, we are required to file our housing plan, an adopted housing plan, with the state, and at the same time, the governing body is required to endorse that plan and include it in that filing. If we do not meet that date, we would lose our immunity from affordable housing litigation, so it's very critical that we meet that date. And I know you want to talk about some scheduling for...
Yeah, I could speak to the public engagement plan and kind of reiterate
Yes.
those major timelines. But
Correct.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Please.
just one clarification, Joe, also by the, Mr. Burgess, first name basis, Mr. Burgess. The June 30 deadline for the adoption of the Housing Element Fair Share Plan by the Planning Board and endorsement by the governing body also includes, correct me if I'm wrong, having our draft implementation ordinances at the ready, if you will.
Yes, and the key is that they're draft ordinances at that point. We actually have until March of 2026 to adopt those ordinances. So, so the first first three steps in the process have really been complete. We filed our number. We received, certain towns have received objections. We did not. And those that received objections are now finishing the process with the retired judges who will be making recommendations to the Mount Laurel judges in court to step up that part of the process.
It's a good thing we didn't have to have declaratory judgment actions again this time in the fourth round as we did in the third round. Okay, wait, yes, we did.
Part of the problem with the process is that the timeline set up by the legislature never contemplated this reallocation issue. In fact, it's never been done before, so this is something new that had come up. The fact that the legislature created a timeline that said every municipality may file as late as January 31st, and then the objection period begins February 1, certainly suggests that the legislature never was contemplating reallocation, because in order to do reallocation, you had to know what every municipality in your housing region was adjusting their number down to. So if you all filed on January 30th or 31st, nobody had any time to look at all those other plans in your housing region. Typically, housing regions are 80 to 125 towns.
There's 6 out of 564 municipalities, right? So,
yeah. So nobody would have had the time pursuant to the timeline established by the legislature. But this has become a big issue that is being resolved this week, actually, or the end of this week. So we'll keep you posted on that.
We'll see if it's entirely resolved or if there's more litigation to come, perhaps.
Well, perhaps, that's spoken like a true
So
attorney.
thankfully, all of us have been spared kind of the gore of what's happening in Trenton right now, or Zoom calls or whatever may be going on. Delia, do you have a question? Any welcoming
Well,
questions?
I think if you're sitting at home and you're wondering what everybody's talking about, it's a complicated issue. So I want to thank Mr. Burgess for giving us the guidance during this process. The amount of emails and text messages I got when we weren't challenging our number, it was like get in line. Because everybody was wondering why we weren't doing it. But thank you, Mr. Warner, and thank you, Mr. Burgess. We truly have the best professionals who are leading us in the right direction. So I guess my question is, who's responsible for the reallocation? Because it seems to go completely against odds at the original, dissection of the allocation based on income, based on
Right, well, the whole issue of reallocation has not been settled yet.
Okay.
And the reality is that under rounds 1 through 3, reallocation never existed. In fact, even with this round, originally DCA calculated that statewide we need about 84,000 affordable units by 2035. And then they adjusted that downward to 80,000 based on the 1,000-unit cap that certain municipalities had in their favor. And nobody talked about those 4,000, I think it was 3,900 units as having to be reallocated. So even through the process, nobody was contemplating this. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, 2 weeks ago, this issue came up. And I know initially, during these sessions, there was a lot of questions from the judges as to the validity of the issue. But they're coming to a head this week. We'll find out what they have to say about that. And as somebody just said, might have been Mr. Warner, in all likelihood it will end at the end of this week, but there will be litigation concerning it.
It'll just take one municipality to say, not going to fold.
Yeah.
But Our city doesn't have to worry about that, but, and if I may, just to, if anybody didn't understand what the reallocation is, but at least one way of viewing it is, it's to get back up to that, not the 84,000 statewide number, but the 81,000 with the cap statewide number, broken down by region. So it is a net adjustment up, so to speak, for lost units when municipalities did correct downward correctly their number, those that did, or at least tried to. The concept is, no matter what happens, if anybody goes down, we make up for these lost units by everybody or a subcategory of everybody going up. So suffice to say that in hindsight, the foresight of the city in not challenging the number was a good thing. It's been proven out.
Wow, okay. Stay tuned for more next month. Any other questions, some members of the board for Mr. Burgess or Mr. Warner? If not.
Mr. Warner, we've had one of our many people watching on YouTube asking if you could speak a little louder.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
sorry. I thought it was-
That won't be
It's
hard,
Mike,
but
yeah.
yes.
That's, whoop, there we go. Be careful what you wish for, but hopefully you could hear me better now.
Okay. So then the second part of our Housing Element and Fair Share Plan discussion for this evening, I wanted to speak to the public engagement portion of it. So while Joe and Steve and Nancy are down there fighting tooth and nail in Trenton on behalf of Summit, and we're grateful for that, it is important that the public input is received throughout this process as we find the right contours of the Housing Element and Fair Share Plan for Summit. And the process is not done. There's work still to be done here in Summit. Kind of working from the back, from the end, with the end in mind here, by the end of June, the planning board would have adopted the Housing Element and Fair Share Plan, and it would have been endorsed by the governing body. So what that means in terms of the timeline is likely in the first 2 weeks of the month of June, exact date and time to be announced. There will be likely a special meeting for the planning board dedicated to presentation of the final draft, a listening session, input from the public, and then a vote by the planning board itself. Once, if and when that is adopted, for which we expect it to be by that point, it'll be transmitted to the governing body. The governing body would endorse it, and we would have concluded that stage in the Housing Element and Fair Plan, Housing Element and Fair Share Plans development here for the city of Summit. So before that, because that is not the only opportunity for the public to input in June, that's awful late, and it is March now, we have April and May. And it's the intention of the planning board to utilize principally these regularly scheduled public sessions to solicit public input on Housing Element and Fair Share Plan. So think of it in two parts. In April, we will invite Joe and Steve again to share an update on what's happening out there in the big wide world. We will expand the conversation a bit. Joe and his team will prepare a brief reflection on round 3, which will help us kind of look back, in a sense, on how the Housing Element and Fair Share Plan for round 3 was developed, what worked, what didn't work, what the public enjoyed, what materialized, what didn't, to give some context, the opportunity for the public to reflect with a little bit of a clearer picture as to how the last 10 years transpired with regard to how affordable housing here in the city. We'll open in that session, a listening session, much as we'll have tonight for cross-acceptance, where you're welcome to comment on what you saw or separately what you bring to the session for the board to absorb and kind of take into their considerations. We will likely in that session break into a closed session where with our professionals we'll debate and discuss what we're hearing from the public, what we're hearing from our attorneys, from our planner, feedback from the state to help inform the development of the Housing Element and Fair Share Plan. Then in May, we will follow a similar structure. Mr. Burgess, again, he's working extra overtime for us here, and we're grateful for it. We'll turn the attention for his presentation to the development, what is occurring in round 4. So some of the things that we'll be looking for that will be informing the round 4 Housing Element and Fair Share Plan is site selection, where we would anticipate development to occur in the community that would be inclusive of affordable housing. Density for those sites, or generally within the municipality, building heights, other dimensions and contours that will help us have an understanding as to the number that we have, how we will satisfy it. And again, with the draft ordinances really being glimpse into how we would enable it as a municipality. That's really how the Housing Element and Fair Share Plan comes together. So the May meeting's meant to give the public, as well as the board, an update into the number we have, how we're wrestling with the relevant dimensions. It'll give you a better opportunity to comment on building heights, whether you want to see continued restriction limitation to 4 and 5 story buildings downtown, or you'd love to see a 10-story skyscraper. Please don't, for my sake, come and say that, but you're welcome to offer really whatever comment you would like at that time for us to, again, then break into closed session, where we'll incorporate public input from our professionals to help guide the development of the Housing Element and Fair Share Plan. So after 2 listening sessions dedicated to Housing Element and Fair Share Plan in April, then again in May, prior to the special meeting in June, the final draft of the Housing Element and Fair Share Plan will be released. The public will have the ability to pick it apart, prepare any questions or comments they may have on it, and then we'll have the June meeting where we'll invite public comment for a last time and ultimately vote on it. So that's a long-winded. I hope everyone was transcribing that online. We'll type it all out and give you a nice little table or something. But for the folks, especially that may have come tonight interested in affordable housing, know that we're not waiting until June to incorporate your input. We know that you need context, and we're going to give it to you. And really, along the way, when you come to speak at the dais, or if you were to speak to any member of the planning board, we encourage you to be clear. What information are you looking for? Or do you have doubts or questions? Where are there gaps for you to really offer meaningful input? So that's the long-winded explanation of the public input process that we plan to spin up here, and we're grateful for everyone, board members included, professionals as well, for taking time to be here and be so thoughtful on behalf of the City of Summit. So that's it for Housing Element and Fair Share Plan. The real final element of our agenda this evening is the preliminary state plan listening session. So I'll invite Mr. Burgess again to give a very brief overview of what you may have heard us refer to as cross-acceptance, or the preliminary state plan, what that is, how it's used, and how Summit is engaging through the negotiating entity, the county, how we're kind of passing back our feedback to hopefully inform that in a way that has Summit's needs appropriately reflected, your input certainly heard and reflected to the degree that we can, and that be a useful point of reference for everyone moving forward. So, Joe, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay.
If you can.
The state of New Jersey had adopted a comprehensive state development and redevelopment plan back in the year 2000. That document was a whopping 425-page document that identified in great detail, how the growth of the of the state has gone on for a number of years, and what the projection for additional growth would be. They also identified a whole host of goals, objectives, and policy statements that were very definitive and very detailed. Because it was such a tome, I don't think it got the reading that they expected, so they are trying a different approach this time around. They were supposed to re-examine this document every couple years. It was 3 years, yes. Turns out it's every 24 years that they're doing it, 25 years. And this time around, they've taken a totally different approach. Instead of being a document that was a living, breathing, usable document, now it's become just an advisory document. It's brief, it's less than 50 or 60 pages, and it doesn't carry the weight that the previous document did. It used to be that planners, when they appeared before planning boards, councils, or zoning boards of adjustment, planners would often talk about that document and how their development applications were being consistent in furthering the goals of that document. This document, the state has clearly said, is not to be used that way. Municipalities can adhere to the goals that are suggested or not. And so it's been watered down to such a degree that it does not have the power and strength that it once did. Now, having said that, we are going through this cross-acceptance process whereby the state has asked the municipalities through their county to review the document and offer a number of comments about it. Specifically, they have a 3-page handout that asks some pertinent questions about where each individual municipality is with respect to its master plan or reexamination report and development ordinances. It asks for additional information about some other factors that you might want to have considered when you go through the cross-acceptance process with your county. And we are, Tom Burns from my office is going through that right now, and we'll be probably presenting it at our next planning board meeting to show you what we're saying. But one of the things that it does ask is that you identify a number of, or the biggest concerns that the municipality may have. And I think that's one of the reasons we're going to be bringing in the public to participate in that kind of discussion at some point. The counties have just begun to hold public sessions on this. Each county is holding one hearing over the next couple of months. And following that, the state is going to take all that information and make adjustments to their document. And then they're only going to have 6 hearings scattered throughout the state in 6 different counties, before they will then adopt this document as an advisory document only.
Okay, wonderful. So we've saved you a trip to one of those 6 hopeful meetings, and God, some knows where, right? Rahway, New Brunswick, Trenton. Who knows, right?
They haven't identified the 6.
Yeah, exactly. Probably not Summit. So the intention, as Joe suggested, is while we're leveraging this members of the planning board, city administration, our board professionals to help inform Summit's input to the county's input to the state. One of the questions, and I had to pull it up to get the wording exactly right, and I appreciate our communications office for helping to spread the good word over social media and other channels. The input that we're inviting you to provide is reflection on what are your communities, so in this case Summit's, 3 most important local and regional planning goals and priorities. It's pretty open-ended. In the flyer that we had distributed, we identified for reference to give you some contours as to the scope. 5 of the 10 goals that the preliminary state plan is focused on, those being economic development, housing, infrastructure, historic and scenic resources, natural and water resources. So while planning board members, again, as I said, city administration and others have their own opinions, we were consulting the master plan out of our own experience. We wanted to offer an opportunity, and this is your opportunity if you're here, to come up to the lectern here and share any thoughts that you believe is relevant to what you believe are Summit's 3 most important local and regional planning goals and priorities. I won't do you the disservice of a 3-minute clock or anything as punitive as that. You can go elsewhere for that. There are plenty of other meetings in town that need to use that method. But it asks you, to the best of your ability, to limit your comments to again, the scope of the question that's being presented here. I don't know if we need to swear people in. I don't think so.
It's not a public hearing, so we do not need to swear people in. Name and address just for the record is helpful, though.
So with that, I'll step back. Does anyone care? You came out this evening. I put on a good show, but not that good of a show. Anyone care to come forward and offer some thoughts on our planning priorities? No? Could have watched this on YouTube. Come on, you came all the way down here. All right, we got one taker.
I'll get 2.
Couple, okay. Thank you.
Good evening, Peter Sabello.
Your address, Mr. Savella, sorry, just for the record.
11 Greenfield Avenue in Summit.
Thank you.
One of the things, and it's strictly a local concern, I don't see it being elevated to the state level, maybe into the county level with the property, but Martin's Brook along Butler Parkway is nothing but dead wood that have fallen over, blocking the stream. You get the sports activities, the buses come in, the people come in from out of town, they get out of the cars, and they look at the woods, and what do they see? But dead wood fallen over that are just waiting to burn. Mm-hmm. If we have a hot summer again and somebody discards a cigarette, those woods are going to be gone from one end to the other. I'd like to see that cleaned up as an environmental concern, and there's a lot of springs in there as well, so there's a water concern.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Great example. Thank you. Christopher Lee, please.
Sure. The first speaker was a great start. My name is Dan Crisafulli, 25 Greenbrier Drive here in Summit. Nice to see you, many of you again. I'm here on behalf of the Environmental Commission, where I was reappointed by Mayor Fagan under the current administration. Donna Patel, the chair of the commission, asked me to share our case for climate change to be one of the top priorities for future planning. The role of the Environmental Commission is to provide leadership and vision in advising the city of Summit on actions and policies of sustainability. And we feel that the climate change cuts across many aspects of planning for the future. Stormwater management is currently one of our hot topics. When I bought my home here 8 years ago, I thought that our hilltop location would protect us. But unfortunately, we can't rest easy. We need a plan for long-term adaptation to climate impacts along Salt Brook and our other watersheds. A systemic approach can help us reduce runoff, retain more water in the ground for dry periods. The previous speaker mentioned drought. Each summer it seems to get worse. Fire could be coming next to Summit. It's getting closer to us. Drought has already impacted our plants and wildlife. Good planning should help us prepare. Storms bring power outages as well as floods. Solar energy can be a resilient source of electricity and often brings cost savings. Energy conservation gets very few people excited, but modest investments can save real money. Given these risks and opportunities, I would strongly advocate on behalf of the Environmental Commission for climate to be among the top priorities.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Mr. Crisafulli. Excellent. Any other feedback anyone would like to offer this evening? Don't worry, I won't force you to come, but want to give you ample opportunity to. Okay. You're thinking about it. I can see it in your eyes. No? No. Anyone? All right, last call. All right, that'll be it for this evening's then public input session. I'll remind, though, the interested public, you this evening, if you wake up tonight and something strikes you, or anyone watching on YouTube, that we have available through summitdcs@cityofsummit.org. You may send an email with your feedback. We're asking you to return any feedback by April 21st. So again, we can collect that, organize it, reflect upon it, share it with our planners, members of the city administration that are interacting with the county and ultimately with the state. But we appreciate everyone who came out tonight, interested, offered comments or not. No harm there. But we're grateful again for the public's input and interest in our planning and zoning priorities. This is just one opportunity. Actually, we have the Housing Element and Fair Share Plan, public engagement, which I spoke to earlier. Later in the year, we'll be looking to master plan reexamination. So if you're interested in planning and zoning, you've found the right place. It's the planning board. So we welcome you to continue to show up, offer your input and comment. With that, sorry. Oh, Delia, yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a couple of comments regarding, I can't say your last name. I'm having a hard time saying
Crisafulli.
Crisafulli.
Yes.
Mr. Crisafulli's comments. Just a quick update. We had Congressman Kane here last Friday, so just a few days ago, along with Union County Assistant Manager Amy Wagner, and we also had Commissioner Al Marabella out here. We spent about an hour and a half at the Salt Brook, so we would certainly welcome the Environmental Commission to be as engaged as you would like. We really need assistance. Those residents are really suffering, and the holistic view of how the residents in the Salt Brook are losing their homes is something the entire community should be paying attention to. We have reached out to and had meetings with New Jersey DEP. We're working with our grant writers. We are literally all over the state of New Jersey trying to fix this problem. So I would welcome anybody who has any solutions. It's a real big issue. And regarding solar, thank you for your comments on that. I'd like to update the community. A few council members, including myself, have recently done a reevaluation of past solar initiatives and looking at how we can work with the Board of Ed and all of our current municipality buildings to do a complete evaluation. And we're going to have further discussions at the Board of School Estimate meeting on Thursday as we look at electricity costs across the municipality and the Board of Ed. So great comments, and I think that those are a lot of important conversations. So I just wanted to update the community on that.
Thank you, Delia. All right, any other comments, or Mr. Masso, yeah?
I do have one comment. Also, that type of feedback is incredibly helpful because you outline the issues. For example, what was mentioned immediately makes me think of urban forestry management. You see dead wood, you see a space which is undercared for or maybe even underutilized, and bringing that problem across to the planning board and helping us prepare these perspectives is what's going to translate to our response to Union County. And on a base level, the government of the city has an opportunity to see the issues that you as residents face every single day. So that kind of input, we are very happy to receive it at that Summit DCS at citysummit.org email address. Please feel free to reach out up through April 21st with all of your insight, because this is about yourself, it's about your neighbors, and every street you walk on in town. So keep that in mind, and thank you so much for the insights.
Wonderful. All right. With that, we have concluded our agenda for the evening for 8:30.
I have a question.
Please,
Do you
Susan.
have to redo my oath while we're still in the public meeting or no?
We don't, though. If there's anything you need to sign or what have you, Nicole or Steve will walk you through that, no problem. Okay. With that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned until April 28th, 2025. See you then.